I'm not going to read this all, but you have had prominent members of Congress, people like Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Ed Royce, Senator Robert Menendez from New Jersey, making statements in support of both of these agreements, saying that it really preserves Taiwan's ability to do business internationally in an environment free of coercion, enables Taiwan to diversify its investments, and one of the key points that needs to be raised is that when the United States negotiates these types of bilateral agreements with Taiwan, whether you're talking about the Trade Investment Framework Agreement talks, the TIFA talks, whether you're talking about a potential a bilateral trade agreement down the road, free trade agreement, Taiwan sets the bar very high. This is kind of how Taiwan has gotten Democrats on board, since traditionally there's been a little more opposition to some of these free trade agreements on the Democratic side. Menendez says, again, a Democrat from New Jersey, Taiwan is willing to support a high-standard, comprehensive agreement that addresses many issues, including labor and the environment, currency manipulation, and intellectual property rights. So again, Taiwan has the ability to set a new standard for quality free trade agreements. So these are things we need to be thinking about down the road. TIFA talks recently resumed. It's too early to talk about a free trade agreement, but we can continue to talk about the BIA. We continue to talk about ascending to TPP. And these are key priorities moving forward. Okay, just moving on quickly to democracy and human rights. Everyone's been following the sunflower movement. I don't have to go into this in too much depth, but recent trends do suggest an erosion of democracy and human rights in Taiwan, drawing concerns from the State Department, academics, NGOs, journalists, and many others. You look at the Wild Strawberry movement. You look at some of the political persecution cases. Look at the treatment of the former president, what happened in the Sunflower movement. There are a number of signs that something has gone awry, something is wrong. Most recent example is in the 2014 Freedom of the World report. New York City NGO Freedom House praised the student and civil society groups that have tried to influence political debate and government policy. Movements such as the anti-media monopoly movement successfully fought to prevent media monopolization and reject China's effort to manipulate information and public opinion in Taiwan. At the same time, Freedom House expressed concerns over the political independence of prosecutors, especially the Special Investigative Division, which is tasked with investigating high-profile cases. Even with Chen and with other DPP officials, you see, okay, they're indicted, no wait, they're not. No, they're convicted, no wait, they're not. There's a lot of back and forth going on, and this is really damaging to Taiwan. Ma Ying-jeou, accused by The Economist of bumbling his way through the presidency, and recently chided by one of my colleagues at the Project 2049 Institute for his poor communication skills, is receiving a lot of criticism for the way he handled the sunflower movement. And these are Alyssa's photos, by the way. I included some photos. I think it's worth pointing out that even some of Ma's allies have really questioned the way the administration conducted itself during the sunflower movement. Rex Howe spoke to public concerns when he stated that in the same way as those who are opposed to the nuclear power plant worry about the risks associated with atomic power, those who oppose the service trade agreement worry about the agreement's impacts on the nation, its industries, and society. When I was still living in DC until like 2 weeks ago, a lot of people misunderstood what the sunflower movement represented. I had to talk a lot with people in different sectors of Washington society about, well, what do the students really want? Is this anti-China or is this something more? And a lot of people in Washington are confused about what the students wanted, how they were articulating their demands, how the government was responding. And so it's very important for people to try and set the record straight. We had, numerous campaigns to inform the government, members of Congress, other people in Washington about what the motivations of the students were and what they were trying to achieve and why this trade pact could have negative consequences for Taiwan. One simple thing that we can do to improve the bilateral relationship is to make sure that congressional delegations and other officials visiting Taiwan proactively request meetings with opposition parties, NGOs, and civil society groups based throughout the country. Normally what happens is if Congressman Johnny Walker wants to go visit Taiwan, MOFA arranges the meeting for him. And let's face it, if the Ma administration currently controls MOFA, they might not include certain types of meetings. And so if the congressman says, you know what, I want to visit the local Amnesty International chapter in Taiwan, or I want to visit this anti-nuclear group, then MOFA will say yes. They won't refuse. But the trick is, you have to ask for it. So then it becomes our responsibility to encourage members of Congress to not let MOFA do all the trip planning for them. I mean, and this is true with any political party. I don't want to just criticize the Ma administration. I mean, it works the same way no matter who's in power. So it's always the responsibility of the citizenry, of American citizens as well as Taiwanese citizens, to try and influence the content of these trips, try and make sure that Taiwan's voice, the voice of the Taiwanese people, is adequately represented. And that is achieved by making sure Congress people visit NGOs, visit opposition leaders, visit a wide variety of actors so that they don't get, so that they don't become misinformed or get only a partial picture of what's happening on the ground in Taiwan. Also, it's worth noting that even American Institute in Taiwan can help facilitate those meetings. So it doesn't just have to be Congress unilaterally reaching out to TECRO or to MOFA. Members of Congress or the government, the executive branch, can go to AIT and say, hey, we really want to meet with Min Feifan, or hey, we really want to meet with the anti-nuclear groups. And they can arrange those meetings as well. So we have different venues to push that issue forward. One other issue is we need to reopen block channels of communication with Taiwan officials. Recently, we had the first visit in 14 years. This is U.S. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Gina McCarthy. In April 2004, she visited Taiwan. Here she is, if you can see it. She's visiting an exhibition on U.S.-Taiwan environmental cooperation. So the last time a U.S. cabinet-level official visited Taiwan was in 2000. So you had 14 years with no visits. What does that do for bilateral communication? So in March 2008, candidate Obama called to reopen block channels of communication with Taiwan officials. The United States government should encourage visits by high-level cabinet officials between the United States and Taiwan to foster commercial, technological, and people-to-people exchanges. The U.S. government should also lift restrictions on visits by senior Taiwanese leaders to the United States. Right now, if the Minister of National Defense wanted to come for talks, he has to meet outside the Beltway. Or, high-level officials, they have to meet outside the Beltway. They cannot even come to the D.C. city limits. It's like we're dealing with North Korea or Iran, So they should also allow senior officials of the Departments of State and Defense to travel Taiwan on official business. In order to promote clearer, more direct communication between leaders in the United States and Taiwan, President Obama should reopen these block channels of communication. One of the people I work with was a former high-level Bush official who worked on Taiwan, as well as a number of other countries. And he said that there was certainly a problem with miscommunication between the two sides because there were no effective channels. If you can't just pick up the red phone and call the president, what do? A lot of people have said that's one of the reasons why we had this miscommunication on the 2004 referenda. Because the U.S. government heard referenda, and somehow didn't bother to check the facts of what the content of the referenda were, and so we jumped the gun. and criticize the referendum before we even heard the content. So if you have poor channels of communication, messages don't get through, there's a lot of misunderstandings that begin to creep up, and bilateral relations will suffer as a result. So again, something very simple we could do to make sure that Taiwan's representatives can meet with us and we can meet with them. Another big one I'll go through quickly is participation in international organizations. We mentioned this a bit before. Taiwan's democratic experience, scientific and technological expertise, we have a lot of scientists here, world-class healthcare system, and humanitarian assistance have made valuable contributions to people all over the world. If Taiwan's voice is extinguished in the international community, then the United States will lose an essential democratic, economic, and security partner. It's thus in the United States' interest to expand Taiwan's international space by facilitating Taiwan's participation as a member observer in existing international organizations such as the UN, TPP, International Monetary Fund, World Bank, and Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I mentioned ICAO before, the debacle with ICAO. Some of these organizations allow for direct membership. Some do not, but the point is that people still need to fight for meaningful participation. Where you can join, where you can observe. But if you're entirely left out of the loop, then you're not going to get help when you need it most, and you also can't make positive contributions to the international community. So, let's skip ahead. Again, quickly, we already discussed this, but with international health, health should not be used as a political weapon. As I said, I lived in China during the SARS crisis. Many of you remembered the Chinese ambassador, I believe it was Ambassador Xia, who when asked about the needs of Taiwan during the SARS crisis, he says, well, who cares about Taiwan? He actually said that to the press. Who cares about Taiwan? Well, if you're claiming Taiwan as part of China, well, maybe you should care. But this is a problem. So the United States, U.S. allies, our other democratic partners, all need to try and push this issue forward. I'm not going to go into it too much here because this is something I think you've all heard about. Just mention quickly, 2009 was the first year that Taiwan was able to participate as an observer in the WHA, but of course China required that Taiwan had used the degrading moniker of Chinese Taipei. Well, what the heck is Chinese Taipei? No one in America seems to know what that means. It's, and of course it's very different looking in English than in Chinese, because in Chinese you can say, 中国台北, but you can also say 中国台北, and they mean different things. But in English, all you hear is Chinese Taipei. So very misleading, open to misinterpretation. And China takes full advantage of that. But in China, former TAO Chairman Wang Yi stated, well, Beijing will never accept Taiwan's participation in the WHO. So it's important for people on the Hill in the State Department to try and push for support for Taiwan without attaching strings. Some of you might have also heard about a leaked secret memo proving that the WHO, which is an agency of the United Nations, refers to Taiwan as a province of China. But nevertheless, President Ma continues to laud Taiwan's participation in the World Health Body and says that we will copy our experience in the WHO and join more international organizations on the basis of that model. So again, yes, I support participation. I think everyone in this room supports participation. But it's also a question of being careful how you frame the participation, the process by which you participate. Those can be just as important because you don't want to back yourself into a corner, get into a situation from which you can't escape later on. I don't think you can really see this here, but I just pulled up a document that says that China, it's basically a note for the World Health Organization that says, do not use the phrase Taiwan. Under the UN, this is considered a province of China. It should therefore be referred to as Taiwan, China. Chinese Taipei should be used only in a list of participants, summary records, and similar documents. So basically saying, okay, we're going to do this secretly without anyone's knowledge. To its credit, the United States found out about this in 2008 and, publicly disavowed the policy and said, look, if you're going to do this, the United States is going to declare officially that it will not recognize this policy because, as we discussed earlier, the United States believes that the status is undetermined. It does not officially view Taiwan as a province of China. So this made big headlines back in 2008, but you can see behind closed doors, organizations such as the WHO, the UN are ceding to Chinese pressure. Again, here another document. You can't read this here, but it's just really looking at the confusing nomenclature. This 中国台北 versus 中华台北 versus Chinese Taipei versus how things are worded differently in English and Chinese. I'm sure you've all noticed that language can be manipulated due to inconsistencies in the two languages. I'm going to stop here. As I said, I tried to cover a whole lot of ground, so I hope I didn't put you all to sleep. But I really wanted to address the issue from different angles, historical, political, et cetera, et cetera. So if you have any specific questions about specific topics, I'd be very happy to try and address them or tell you where to find out more information, so on and so forth. But thank you for being so kind and welcoming me here tonight. I'm really thrilled to return to the city. Thanks.